Title: The $270 million Banana. Why Shanghai leaning luxury tower can never be destroyed. Effects: deep, rumbling sub-bass bump. Visual: flashing high contrast graphic. Critical constructural fascia in bold red and black glitch. Text narrator: urgent, fast-paced, high-energy U.S. cable news style. On the eastern edge of Shanghai's glittering Huangpu River waterfront, right where the historic shipping lanes meet the modern financial district, developers promise to erect the ultimate symbol of ultra-luxury. 60 stories of shimmering, pale green architectural glass leaning gracefully over the water, designed to frame the iconic neon lights of the Bund. It was marketed as the One Riverfront Tower, an exclusive enclave of 80 massive luxury condominiums with a projected sellout value of over 1.9 billion yuan, roughly $272 million US. But look closer. FX sharp vinyl scratch. Drone footage zooming in on misaligned facade. Today, that 60-story megatower stands completely sealed, dark, and frozen. Not a single resident has ever spent a single night inside its premium penthouse suites. For nearly a decade, it has loomed over the Shanghai skyline, finished on the outside, but completely hollow and dead on the inside. It is a multi-million-dollar monument of glass and concrete that nobody can complete, nobody can sell, and, most terrifyingly, nobody can bring down. Why? Because the most catastrophic cost of this architectural disaster was never measured in bank loans or building materials. Washing transition, extruding 3D mortal of a bent tower. This is the structural reality of 161 Shanghai Lane. Instead of standing as a straight, proud testament to engineering excellence, the 205-meter high-rise is actively failing. It leans exactly 76 millimeters, 3 full inches, to the north. The premium glass curtain wall is literally coming loose from its steel anchors. The Municipal Housing Bureau's mandatory certificate of occupancy never arrived. And as the legal battles exploded behind closed doors, independent structural surveyors gave the ultimate insult to the design. They told the arbitration panel that the entire skyscraper was shaped like a massive, 60-story banana. The real mystery here isn't just how a cutting-edge, 21st-century luxury skyscraper began to warp and bend. It is the terrifying gridlock holding the entire project hostage. Why can a megacity with the sheer engineering muscle, endless capital, and ruthless efficiency of Shanghai not simply get rid of a dangerous, defective building? Why is leaving a tilting, glass-shedding tower standing in a high-density zone actually cheaper than fixing it or blowing it up? SFX low drifting drone. The answer is colder, harder, and far more calculation-driven than a simple engineering mistake. To understand why this massive tower is bending toward the river, you have to look past the gleaming facade. You have to descend deep into the pitch-black subterranean layers beneath the foundation, into ground that was never told to hold this kind of weight. Much of this prime waterfront district is not solid bedrock. It is artificial landfill. For over a century, as the city exploded from a regional trading port into a sprawling global financial superpower, millions of tons of dirt, rubble, industrial debris, and timber were aggressively pushed into the riverbanks to artificially expand the island blocks. The solid, unyielding rock that a skyscraper absolutely relies on to anchor. Its immense weight lies deep, deep below this unstable muck. Heavy, punchy industrial beat marks the timeline. There is an honest way to build on landfill. It is the expensive way. You must deploy massive, heavy-duty hydraulic rigs to drive deep concrete and steel piles all the way through the soft, shifting upper layers of silt until they hit true rock, allowing the Earth's crust to carry the skyscraper's load. It's the non-negotiable method used by every single iconic tower surrounding One Riverfront. In fact, the developer's own geotechnical engineers explicitly warned them in writing. Use deep rock piling or face catastrophic shifts, but the developer, Huoxin Property Group, chose a shortcut. They opted for a cheaper, faster alternative known as soil improvement. Instead of drilling to the bedrock, heavy machinery compacted the soft, waterlogged river fill, mixing it with chemical binding agents so that it would behave, briefly, like something solid. According to explosive lawsuits later filed by the main contractor, the decision came down to one brutal metric. Cost was the primary consideration. The immediate savings from skipping the deep bedrock piles? A modest 2% of the total construction budget. just about 42 million yuan, roughly $6 million US. They risked a $272 million asset to save a mere $6 million bucks. That single, calculated 2% compromise is the original sin of 161 Shanghai Lane, and it was only the very first corner cut that anyone actually wrote down. For 3 long years, the tower rose into the Shanghai sky. Floor after floor, week after week, the concrete pumps hummed, and the structure climbed higher. From the outside, everything looked flawless. The public marveled at the rapid construction cycle. But beneath the surface, the treated soil was already failing, slowly, silently, and completely unevenly. As the immense, crushing weight of 60 stories of reinforced concrete finally bore down, one side of the foundation began settling much faster than the other. Like a top-heavy loaded bookcase placed on a thick, soft carpet, the skyscraper began to tilt. One corner sank into the river mud, and the entire tower drifted further out of alignment with every passing week. This is the textbook engineering nightmare known as differential settlement. The exact failure the initial geotechnical reports explicitly predicted. By April 2018, the reality could no longer be hidden behind corporate public relations. The concrete subcontractor halted their pumps and put the emergency in writing. Severe structural anomalies, unusual settlement, and a building leaning 3 inches off axis to the north. In a realm of high-rise construction where tolerances are strictly measured to the single millimeter, a 3-inch lean is an absolute, unmitigated catastrophe. SFX. Industrial alarm klaxon beat. Visual. Fast text flyby. Engineering chronology. Tuxpert 2017-2020 narrator. When a 205-meter tower begins to morph into a 60-story banana, you don't see it happen in real time. It is a slow-motion architectural train wreck driven by pure physics and brutal mathematics. To understand how Huashan Property Group's flagship luxury high-rise became a useless monument of concrete and glass, we have to look at the exact engineering chronology, a timeline where millimeter-level errors compounded into an unfixable structural nightmare. SFX, ticking clock sound effect. Growing louder, the timeline of this engineering disaster officially accelerates in mid-2017. The concrete pouring schedule for 161 Shanghai Lane was moving at a blistering pace. The project was utilizing a rapid build cycle, pouring a new structural floor slab every 5 to 7 days. Thousands of cubic meters of heavy, reinforced concrete were being pumped straight up into the Shanghai sky, adding millions of kilograms of dead load to the foundation week after week. But remember, that foundation was not resting on bedrock. It was sitting on a shallow, artificially compacted cushion of river silt and chemical binders. By October 2017, when the tower's structural core passed the 35th floor, the independent laser telemetry systems utilized by the crane operators began throwing warning codes. The vertical alignment lines, which must remain perfectly plumb to ensure the building's weight transfers directly downward into the ground, were drifting. The building wasn't just settling, it was settling uneven, simulating architectural telemetry anomalies. This is the exact moment the engineering math broke. In standard high-rise construction, uniform settlement is expected. A massive building can sink an inch or two into the earth completely straight, and as long as it does so evenly, the structural integrity remains perfectly intact. But 161 Shanghai Lane was experiencing the ultimate geotechnical sin, differential settlement. The southern edge of the tower's foundation pad was holding firm against the slightly denser inland soil, while the northern edge, facing the soft, waterlogged embankment of the Huangpi River, was actively compressing. The physics are unyielding. As one corner of the foundation sank faster than the others, the entire center of gravity for the 60-story structure shifted toward the north. The heavier the tower grew, the more it pushed down on the failing northern soil, creating a terrifying, self-reinforcing loop of structural deviation. Every single additional floor poured by the construction crews acted as a massive lever, magnifying the lean at the top of the tower. By the time the structure officially topped out at its full 60 stories, the Municipal Construction Commission's emergency inspection team arrived on site to run a comprehensive structural audit. What they found was a geometric disaster zone. The structural core was out of alignment. Floor slabs that were supposed to be perfectly horizontal were tilted at fractional angles. At the highest levels, the building's displacement had reached a jaw-dropping 76 millimeters. 3 full inches of northern lean.fx. Heavy metal clang to an average person, 3 inches over a 205-meter height, might sound like a minor alignment issue. In the boardroom of Huaxin Property Group, executives initially tried to downplay the variance as a routine deviation that could be corrected during the interior fit-out phase. But to the engineers and curtain wall installers, 3 inches was a death sentence for the project. Why? Look at the engineering of a modern glass skyscraper. The glass skin of a high-rise, known as a curtain wall, does not actually support the weight of the building. Instead, it literally hangs like a curtain from specialized steel anchors bolted to the edges of the concrete floor slabs. These anchors and the glass panels they hold are manufactured under strict factory conditions with tolerances down to the single millimeter. They are designed to fit together like a massive, hyper-precise jigsaw puzzle. .fx. Sound of glaciering, stress, crack. On a tower drifting multiple inches out of alignment, the jigsaw puzzle completely breaks. As the installers tried to hang the massive premium glass panels on the lower and mid-levels of 161 Shanghai Lane, they realized the anchors no longer lined up. The distance between the floors was warping. If they bolted a panel tightly to a tilted slab, the immense structural stress of the shifting building would put so much torsion on the architectural glass that the panels would literally explode under the pressure, raining razor-sharp shards down onto the busy Shanghai waterfront below. The contractor immediately recognized the legal liability and halted the facade installation. Dozens of gaps were left open in the building's face, exposing the raw, uninsulated concrete interior to the elements. Some panels that had already been installed began to warp and buckle, forcing crews to hurriedly take them down for public safety. By early 2019, the finger-pointing reached the local courts. The main contractor filed a massive lawsuit against Huaxin Property Group, alleging that they had been forced to build on an inherently unstable cut-rate foundation that they simply inherited from the developer's early cost-cutting decisions. Huaxin countersued, claiming the contractor had botched the concrete pours and mismanaged the floor slab leveling. .fx. Court gavel bangs strikingly while the multi-million-dollar legal warfare filled thousands of pages of court filings. The ultimate authority stepped in. The Municipal Housing Bureau officially denied the building its temporary certificate of occupancy. Without that single piece of paper, a building is legally dead. No one can move in, no retail leases can be signed, and no utilities can be permanently connected. The developer's strict financing agreements required them to secure at least a temporary certificate for the first phase of luxury apartments by the spring of 2020 to unlock the next wave of bank capital. They missed the deadline completely. With their funds frozen, their reputation shattered, and the structural data proving the tower was still actively settling into the river mud, all construction abruptly stopped in July 2020. 60 stories of concrete, warped steel, and missing glass, frozen solid on the edge of the river. SFX, industrial drone, whoosh, low freak vibration. Visual, map of mainland China, pinpointing massive skyscraper, sites undergo extraordinary and structural, stress narrator, to the global observer. A leaning skyscraper might look like an isolated freak accident, a rare combination of bad luck and corporate greed. But seasoned structural engineers across mainland China know a much deeper, more systemic truth. The crisis unfolding at 161 Shanghai Lane is the natural, inevitable byproduct of an era defined by rapid urban engineering, unmatched speed, and the relentless desire to build right up to the absolute edge of nature's boundaries. When you study the structural mechanics of China's most ambitious megaprojects, the Banana Tower of Shanghai is not an outlier. It is a textbook case study that mirrors some of the most famous engineering standoffs in modern architectural history. SFX. Reverberating industrial impact clang, look across the country's ultra-dense river deltas and coastal economic zones. From the soft mudflats of Tianjin's Binhai area to the massive reclaimed waterfronts of Shenzhen and Guangzhou, Chinese engineering has consistently performed miracles on soil that behaves like liquid. But whenever a developer decides that speed and cost take priority over geology, physics strikes back with absolute precision. Consider the famous precedent that shook the construction world right in Shanghai back in 2009. The Lotus Riverside disaster. While not a 60-story luxury high-rise, this 13-story residential block became a global symbol of foundation failure. Workers were excavating an underground parking garage on one side of the building, while piling the excavated dirt up to 10 meters high on the opposite side. The sudden, extreme differential pressure, combined with waterlogging from heavy rains and a shallow, compromised foundation design, caused the lateral earth pressure to completely snap the hollow concrete piles beneath the structure. The entire 13-story building didn't just lean, it literally toppled over in one intact piece, flattening itself against the mud.fx, extended crash and crumbling sound effect. The engineering lesson of Lotus Riverside was clear, loud, and immediate. When you build on soft river silt and clay, the margins for error are zero. If your foundation piles do not find permanent, absolute anchorage in the deep bedrock, the earth beneath a heavy structure will treat concrete like plastic, and the risks only multiply as you go vertical. Look at the iconic Seg Plaza in Shenzhen. In May 2021, that massive 70-story skyscraper sent shockwaves through the tech hub of Huaqiangbei when the entire tower suddenly began to violently vibrate and shake, forcing a mass panic and immediate evacuation of thousands of occupants inside. SFX. Crowd panic, sirens in distance, sharp, stick buzz. For months, top structural minds from the China Academy of Building Research and Engineering faculties nationwide pored over the data. The building was structurally sound, but it had fallen victim to a terrifying phenomenon known as vortex-induced resonance. A combination of structural aging, the removal of a heavy roof mast, and specific wind patterns had turned the skyscraper into a massive tuning fork. It took months of high-stakes engineering intervention, roof stabilization, and structural dampening to make the tower safe for re-entry. What these cases prove is that high-rise towers are not static, immovable objects. They are dynamic, highly stressed engineered systems that constantly interact with wind, temperature, and most importantly, the soil beneath them. SFX, low cyclical humming. Simulating architectural vibration monitor. This brings us right back to the structural trap of 161 Shanghai Lane. When a tower like Seg Plaza shakes due to wind, engineers can add mass dampers or structural braces to absorb the energy. When a building faces minor foundation stress, engineers can inject specialized grouting to stabilize the soil. But when a 205-meter tower experiences massive, unmitigated differential settlement on a riverbank, the engineering solutions disappear into a black hole of financial ruin. Think about the famous Millennium Tower in San Francisco, a global structural crisis that every high-rise engineer in China studied with intense scrutiny. That 58-story luxury tower sank more than 18 inches and tilted several inches because its foundation pad rested on soft clay instead of hitting bedrock. The fix? A painstaking, multi-year engineering nightmare where crews had to slowly drill 52 massive steel piles down into the deep bedrock, transferring a portion of the building's immense weight manually. The cost of just trying to pull the building straight topped $100 million. Nearly half the original value of the entire structure. Huaxin Property Group's engineers looked at that exact global data and realized they were staring directly into the same financial abyss. At one riverfront tower, the differential settlement isn't a problem you can fix with a patch job. Because the developer chose a cut-rate soil improvement method to save 42 million yuan, the entire 60-story structure is now trapped in a state of permanent structural limbo. The tower is too heavy for the ground it stands on, too complex to easily stabilize, and too distorted to ever receive the safety stamps required by the Municipal Construction Commission. It stands as a silent, glittering warning to every engineering firm in Asia. Nature doesn't negotiate, and the earth remembers every single corner you cut. SFX, drone underwater scound filter, then exploding into high-strung violin attack. Visual, dramatic reconstruction graphic. Rain beating down on the unfinished windowless facade of the Banana Tower narrator. Behind every catastrophic engineering failure, Behind every spreadsheet tracking millimeter deflections and differential settlement, there is a human cost that no corporate balance sheet can fully capture. For 161 Shanghai Lane, the true tragedy of the tower is divided into two distinct worlds. On one side, you have the wealthy elites, middle-class families, and high-net-worth investors whose life savings vanished into an unoccupable concrete shell. On the other side, you have the invisible hands, the migratory construction crews, who risked their lives on a project that was structurally cursed from the day the first bucket of concrete was mixed. FX, Municipal Office Ambience. Clattering keyboards. Telephones ringing. Let's look at the numbers that shattered families. By the early months of 2020, even as the tower's structural lean was actively worsening behind closed doors, Huoxin Property Group's marketing machine was running at full throttle. They had already pre-sold 71 of the 80 planned ultra-luxury condominiums. These weren't just standard apartments. These were premier, multi-million yuan investments marketed to China's rising professional class. Successful entrepreneurs, tech executives from neighboring business hubs, and families looking to secure a legacy address on the iconic Shanghai waterfront. Buyers paid massive, non-refundable down payments, some liquidating their entire family portfolios, selling multi-generational properties, and taking out predatory high-interest bridge loans just to secure an address that would never legally exist. SFX. Heartbeat monitor sound effect. Slowing down, consider the story of the Chen family. Mr. Chen, a senior logistics director, and his wife spent nearly 15 years building their savings. In late 2018, looking to provide a permanent home for their aging parents and their teenage daughter, they put down a 15 million yuan deposit on a mid-level 3-bedroom suite at One Riverfront Tower. They were promised a handover date of spring 2021. Instead, they were handed a lifetime of litigation, broken promises, and financial ruin. Today, the Chen family continues to pay massive monthly mortgage payments on an asset they can never step foot inside, while living in a cramped, rented apartment on the outer rings of the city. Their life savings are locked inside a structural hazard that is slowly sinking into the river mud. And they are not alone. 70 other buyers are trapped in this identical financial nightmare, their lives completely frozen around a 60-story monument to corporate greed. But as devastating as the financial losses are, they pale in comparison to the dark, hidden history of the tower's rapid construction cycle. SFX, low industrial thud, distant echo of impact drills to meet the brutal deadlines imposed by Huoxin Property Group's executive board. The main contractor had to keep the construction site operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The pressure to pour concrete, mount steel, and clear floor levels was immense. On a high-rise project moving this fast, safety protocols are often viewed by site foremen not as non-negotiable lifelines, but as obstacles to the weekly bonus structure. It was September 21, 2017. The Shanghai night was thick with humidity, and the tower had just reached its 29th floor. The structure hadn't even begun to lean visible inches yet, but the culture of cutting corners was already deeply embedded in the bedrock of the project management team. SFX. Wind whistling through open steel layers on that shift. A veteran 43-year-old carpenter named Zhang Wei was working on the external concrete formwork platforms. Zhang was a migrant worker from a rural village in western Anhui province. Like millions of other construction laborers who built modern Shanghai, he was the sole breadwinner for his family. He had 5 children back home, all relying on the electronic bank transfers he sent every single month to pay for their schooling, their food, and their medical care. He was a man who survived by working at extreme heights, trusting that the engineering systems around him were secure. That night, Zhang Wei was wearing his heavy safety harness. He had done everything right. But a site foreman, frantic to clear a bottleneck before the morning inspection team arrived, ordered a massive exterior scaffolding section to be mechanically hoisted and moved to the next level. There was only one problem. 5 workers, including Zhang Wei, were still actively standing on that very platform. It was a flagrant direct violation of the Municipal Construction Commission's strict safety guidelines. SFX, screeching metal, snap of steel cable, As the mechanical hoist pulled the platform away from the building's concrete edge, Zhang Wei's harness hook was caught in a transitional dead zone. The platform jolted violently in the wind. Zhang lost his footing. Because the shortcut culture required speed over safety checks, his harness line was attached to a temporary structural anchor point that had never been fully bolted down by the secondary crew. The anchor point ripped completely free from the concrete slab. Zhang Wei fell from the 29-floor mark, dropping over 90 meters into the dark, unsecured, lower staging area of the construction site. He died instantly. Slints, followed by a heavy, hollow metallic clang. The immediate aftermath of the tragedy was a masterclass in corporate damage control. The construction site was shut down for a mere 48 hours. The subcontracting concrete company scrambled its legal team, working aggressively to suppress local media coverage and keep the incident away from social media platforms. Eventually, the company pleaded guilty to criminal negligence and workplace safety violations. And what was the ultimate price for ending Zhang Wei's life? What was the penalty for a shortcut that left 5 children without a father? Under the existing local liability limits for that specific subcontracting tier, the maximum corporate fine allowed by law was just 70,000 yuan, roughly $10,000. The developer and the primary contractor insulated themselves behind layers of shell companies and legal liability waivers. They cut a check for $10,000, cleaned the staging area, and by the following Monday, the concrete pumps were humming once again. The building continued to rise, floor by floor, right over the memory of the man who died building it. Effect sharp cold wind expanding. This is the real, unvarnished foundation of 161 Shanghai Lane. The ultimate failure of this building didn't start when the soil improvement chemicals failed to hold the weight of the structure. It didn't start when the northern edge of the foundation settled faster than the south. It started the exact moment the corporate leadership decided that human lives, structural integrity, and engineering warnings were just arbitrary numbers on a spreadsheet. Numbers small enough to ignore, discount, or buy their way out of. Now, that $10,000 compromise stands permanently etched into the Shanghai skyline. The tower remains completely hollow, its open window sockets whistling in the wind off the Huangpi River. The luxury apartments that were supposed to command 17,000 yuan per square meter are nothing more than damp, dark caverns of exposed rebar and weathering concrete. The buyers continue to weep in lawyers' offices, and the family of Zhang Wei is left with a void that no amount of corporate settlement can ever fill. Every millimeter that this tower continues to drift to the north is a physical manifestation of a flawed philosophy. Proof that when you build a monument out of shortcuts, the structure will eventually collapse under the weight of its own lies. Effects, industrial drowse to a low, threatening hum. Visual, fast-paced grid design, showing financial calculations. Spreading like a virus across the skyline narrator. If a skyscraper cannot be completed, if it cannot be legally occupied, and if it poses an active, structural threat to the public, the logical solution should be immediate. You tear it down. You bring in the demolition teams, clear the site, and start over. But this is where 161 Shanghai Lane transforms from a localized engineering disaster into a permanent structural trap. You cannot simply implode a 60-story high-rise on the edge of the Shanghai waterfront. SFX. Explosion simulation, sharp cut to silence controlled demolition using precision explosives belongs to wide-open spaces, abandoned industrial parks, or isolated urban zones. It has absolutely no place on a hyperdense, narrow lot wedged directly against a major elevated riverside expressway, the active shipping lanes of the Huangpi River, and the high-value footings of surrounding transit infrastructure. Commercial buildings and luxury residential blocks sitting literally meters away, an implosion would send a catastrophic seismic shockwave through the waterlogged landfill, potentially destabilizing the delicate foundations of every single structure nearby. This means the banana tower can only come down the exact same way it went up. Floor by floor, panel by panel, piece by piece. Effects. Sound of rhythmic industrial hammering. A manual deconstruction project of this magnitude would take years. It would require the installation of specialized, high-altitude, heavy cranes mounted to a structure that engineers already classify as unstable and actively tilting. Dismantling a leaning, glass-shedding tower is infinitely more dangerous, more complex, and more volatile than building a straight one. It would require a massive, dedicated army of workers, advanced structural bracing at every level, and an absolute fortune in pure capital. And this brings us straight to the cold financial math that keeps everyone frozen in place. SFX. Cash Roger Ching, digital ticker underneath Huaxin Property Group and its state-backed lenders have already sunk more than 1.75 billion yuan, over 250 million US dollars, into this dead asset. To actually fix the building, a secondary engineering firm would have to attempt a massive underpinning operation. They would have to manually excavate beneath the existing, failing foundation pad while the 60-story tower looms overhead, drilling heavy structural piles hundreds of meters down into the earth until they strike true bedrock. The engineering complexity of such an operation on a shifting riverbank is unprecedented, and the cost would easily exceed the original construction budget. Furthermore, satellite telemetry and ground-level sensors confirm that the tower is still quietly, slowly settling into the silt. Even if a flawless, multi-million-dollar engineering miracle could somehow stabilize the foundation and pull the structure back to a perfect vertical alignment, the building's reputation is permanently ruined. No high-net-worth buyer, no elite commercial bank, and no major insurance company will ever touch the infamous Leaning Tower of Shanghai Lane. At an honest market price today, these luxury apartments are worth absolutely zero. FX. Heavy metallic slam. Fixing the tower loses massive amounts of money. Finishing the tower as it stands is a legal and structural impossibility. Tearing the tower down loses hundreds of millions of dollars and leaves nothing but an empty, contaminated lot on a balance sheet. That is why the 60-story banana still stands today. Not because anyone wants it there, not because the city values it, but because doing absolutely nothing is the only corporate choice that avoids cutting the largest, most ruinous check. The system is locked in a state of collective paralysis, waiting for the land beneath the ruin to somehow become worth more than the astronomical cost of removing the concrete carcass above it. SFX. The beat drops out, leaving only a low, haunting ambient wind butt as you look up at the empty, dark silhouette of 161 Shanghai Lane, silhouetted against the neon lights of the Shanghai financial district. The ultimate takeaway of this disaster becomes clear. The terrible engineering behind this leaning tower was never just about poor soil calculations, cheap chemical stabilization, or a misaligned glass curtain wall. It was a failure of philosophy. It was the arrogant belief that the cheapest path and the right path can be forced to be the exact same thing if you simply choose to ignore the data, silence the experts, and override the natural laws of geology. The developer thought they could outsmart the river mud to save a measly 2% of their budget. Instead, they built a 205-meter monument to human error. The tower will likely loom over the water for years to come. A silent, glittering warning to the world that the most catastrophic